Hey, thanks for joining me today. I am going to show you how to bezel a Rivoli. Actually, I'm going to show you how to do it two different ways. The first way will be a basic peyote bezel, and the second way will be a right angle weave. I'm a member of several online beading groups, and several people in those groups were struggling with how to do the bezeling techniques. And so I just wanted to make a real basic video. If you're an experienced beader that has already been doing bezeling, this will be very boring, and I would say just skip watching this video. But if you're someone who has struggled or is new to beading, or I guess if you're really bored, I'm glad you joined me today. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is how to do a peyote bezel. We're going to be bezeling these 14 millimeter Rivolis. These are Swarovski crystals. And the difference between a Rivoli versus a cabochon is a Rivoli has a pointed back. Let's see if I can get this to really pick up. So you can see it comes to a point on the back and also a point on the front. Cabochons are flat on the back. So what we're going to be doing is creating a bezel around it. Here is a crystal that's already been bezeled. I have another one right here that has already been bezeled, so I'm going to teach you how to do this today. Okay, so first of all, I am working with smoke colored Fireline. This is 6-pound test. I have just an arm span length of it, and I've already pre-strung on here 36 delica beads. Okay, these are size 11 delicas. And when we're talking about doing peyote stitch and doing a peyote bezel, delicas are going to be probably your first choice. Now, of course, if you're following a beading pattern, you want to use whatever beads, are included in the pattern. But if you're just doing bezeling to do some of your own creations, and you are using delicas, peyote would be my first choice. So I've already strung these 36 beads on here. And this is going to create our first and second row. So I'm just going to go back up through all 36 beads. And if you're not using size 14 Rivolis, if you're using a 16 or an 18 or, larger, or even if you're using size 12, there's some really good size charts out there that you can look up online. You can Google it. You can go to Pinterest. Laura McCabe has a book, Creating Crystal Jewelry, where she has a sizing chart in there too. They'll tell you exactly how many delica beads you need to use to create the perfect bezel. But for a size 14 millimeter Rivoli, you will need 36 delica beads. Okay, so I've gone back around, and I'm now to the beginning of where I started to string. Now I know some people at this point would tie a knot. I'm not going to tie a knot, and there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, I weave really, really tight. And so it's really not necessary. And secondly, I'm going to go back through these holes a couple more times. But by the time this project is all said and done, and having a knot at this junction could potentially get in the way of my weaving. So I'm not going to tie a knot, but I am going to go back through. I'm going to pass through that first bead again. Okay, so I'm now coming out. I'm going to turn this around actually so you can see. Okay, here's my tail coming out to the left, and here I am on the right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to peyote stitch around this ring. So I'm going to pick up a bead, and I'm going to skip the first bead and go into the second bead. You're basically going every other one around this ring. Okay, so do you see how we look so far? I'm going to pick up another bead, and I'm going to skip this bead, and I'm going to go into the next bead. Someone had mentioned to me, they thought it was odd that I work down instead of up. I have not gone to beading college. I don't have a degree in weaving. I am a self-taught beader, and this is just the way that I bead. You certainly could work up the piece. Let me turn this over and show you what I mean by that. Whatever's most comfortable for you. Okay, so if I'm working up, I'm going to skip and come out of this one. Okay, but this is the look you're going to start to get, is with with that peyote stitch. So we are working row 3 right now, and the way you count your rows, this is row 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we're adding beads to row 3. You're going to go ahead and bead around the circle and add 17 beads. And how do I know it's 17? Well, actually 18 beads will complete the row. I know it stinks that sometimes you have to use math and beading, but we have 36 beads on this ring, and if we're going every other one, 36 divided by 2 is 18. Okay, but I'm going to bead around 17 because I want to show you how to do that. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and bead. I'll be right. Okay, so I've added my 17 beads, and I'm back around getting ready to add the last bead in this row. You can see there's my tail, here's my thread coming out, and most people that struggle with peyote and doing a ring like this and with bezeling, this is where they're going to struggle. I know it's where I struggled initially until I figured it out and I started to develop an eye for what I was doing. In keeping with what we've been doing, you know, and skipping every other one, we're coming out of this bead here. We need to skip and go back into this bead right here, okay? And I'm doing two things at once, so let me get my needle in here and then make sure my focus is on so you can see exactly where I'm going in. Well, come on, camera. I'm obviously a self-taught videographer too, as well as a beader. Okay, so I'm coming out of that bead, and this is how you should look right now. Okay, this is how your ring should look. Now the problem is, we just beaded row number 3. Well, I'm coming out of row number 2. So I've got to get myself back on track before I add my next bead. And what a lot of beaders end up doing is they end up, instead of going in the bead they were supposed to, they skip it and step up into the next row, and it throws the entire thing off. So make sure you look exactly like this before you proceed. And then we need to step up into the correct row, or because I'm beading down, I guess I'm stepping down. No, I'm still stepping up. Okay, and now you're ready to begin the next row. So we're going to add one more row of peyote stitch, and you'll do that by picking up a bead. This row is super easy because you can see where you're supposed to be going. You can see this is the next bead that you're supposed to be going into. So here I go into that bead. Okay, and now at this point what I do is I put this ring on my finger, and you're really going to start to see the bezel shape as you add your beads around. Okay, so I'm going into the next bead. Okay. See what I'm doing here? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add 17 beads, and then when I get those added, I'll show you how to add the last bead in the row just like we did, okay? Okay, so here we are. We're back around to the end of our row, and you can see how this looks. You can see how my ring looks, and we have to do the same thing we did previously, where we have to go in to skip the bead and go into the next bead and then step up into the next row. So I'm going into this bead right here, okay, and then I'm going to step up into the next row. And then this is how I look. Okay, so now you can really start to see that bezel and that bezel shape. Okay, what's going to lock the Rivoli into place is really the next step that we're going to do, and that is adding 2 rows of size 15 beads. And I'm sure most of you already know this, but the size of the bead, the bigger the size of the bead number, the smaller the bead, because they're actually measured in how many beads fit into an inch. So we just did size 11. We're going to add size 15, so these will be smaller beads, and that's going to help pull that bezel in around. So I'm adding a size 15, and we're going to continue to peyote stitch around. Okay, And these, as you start to work with these, it's almost like they sink in between those size 11s. Okay, so there's my second one. And I'm going to do just like I did before. I'm going to go ahead and add 17, and then when it's time to add bead number 18, I'll do a real close-up and slow it down so that you can see how that works. Okay, so here we are at the end of our row, and it's time to add our last size 15. And once again, I'm only skipping the one bead. I'm going in, and then to step up to our next row, I'm going to be going into this little 15 right here, and that'll put me on my next row. Sorry, I bumped the camera. Okay, so this is how we're looking so far. It's starting to look like a bezel. All right, we have one more row to do on this side of the bezel. That'll be another row of 15s, and I hope you're all okay with me stopping the video as I'm going around and just adding these beads. There's nothing more boring than sitting there watching someone else bead, at least in my opinion. That's really boring. And you know, because this is a pretty basic video, the last thing I want to do is bore people. So here's our last row that we're doing. You can see, you know, we're just going to continue to bead right around this bezel, adding these little 15s, and I'll be right back when I've gotten 17 added on here. Okay, so here we are at the end of our last row for this side of the bezel. You can see I'm coming out of this bead right here. I'm going to pass through that 15, and at this point you do not have to step up to the next row because we're done with our rows on this side. So what I'm going to have you do, because we now need to work the opposite side, you're going to take your thread and your needle, and you're just going to work through these rows. They're kind of like stair steps, and I'm doing 2 beads at a time. I'm just passing through those so that I can work around to the other side. Okay, so you can now see I'm coming out the other side. Okay, here's the exciting part that we get to do. We get to put our Rivoli in here. Do Rivolis scratch easily? You know, I don't think they scratch easily. Can you scratch them? Yeah. Have I done it? Yeah. I've done it when I was wearing them. I've never done it when I have worked with them. I know some people are like, oh my gosh, you have to wear cotton gloves and you have to use, you know, the jeweler's tweezers. I don't. Please don't yell at me. I'm just sharing with you what I do. I'm not saying it's the right way. It's just what I do. Okay, so I'm taking my Rivoli. That was my little disclaimer, okay? So I'm taking my Rivoli and I'm putting it face down. And look, it just almost snaps right in there. Look at how nicely that settles right in there. And if you turn it over, look at how nicely that fits. Okay, so now we're ready to finish. We're just going to do 2 more rows of those little 15s on the back of this. Now, I will tell you my hands are clean. I have no lotion on them. Okay, so because if you have lotion on your hands, you're going to be greasing up your Rivoli and your beads, and you don't want to do that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to work another row of these size 15s. Okay, and you can see, once again, let's see if I can get a good focus here. See where my thread is coming out, and we're going to work into that next bead, and we're just going to do every other one like we've been doing. Okay, and you'll see that just that little bit there is already starting to pop and pull that into place. You're going to add another size 15. You can also use roquelles. You can use charlottes. It just needs to be that significantly smaller size as you're going around. And these are regular seed beads. These are not a size 15 delica. Okay, see how that's starting to really pull? So I'm going to continue to work around this circle, and I will be right back when I have added my 17. Okay, so here we are back around to the end of the row, and I'm going to go in, skip a bead, and go in that next one. And then once again, I have to step up into that next row to complete my very, very last row in this bezel. Okay, and this is how you're going to look so far. Now, it is going to look maybe just a little sloppy, and you might be thinking, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? This last row is really going to pull this in and really make it secure. But I will tell you, tension, when you're doing bezels like this, tension is really important. Pay attention to your tension. Keep a tight tension. I think that's part of why I bead down instead of up, because it helps me to hold better tension. I have some disc issues in my back, and the upward motion, I can't pull that way. My arm just won't work very well that way, but if I pull down, it seems to really work for me. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and work around this last row, and once you have completed your last row, you're done. It's bezeled, and it's ready for you to add your embellishments to it. But you can really see as you work this last row how it pulls those beads in nice and tight, and it creates a really nice bezel around that Rivoli. See how that's really snugging in there? This again is the most basic way to bezel a Rivoli, is using the peyote stitch. Now, it's not my favorite. My favorite is actually using right angle weave. And there's a reason for that, and I'm going to show you here in just a minute. I do want to show you how to finish this off and what it's going to look like when it's finished. So once again, I'm going to pause, and magically in a half a second, all those other beads will be on there, and I'll show you the ending. Okay, so here we are, last bead, last row of our bezel, and I'm coming in here, and look at how that just so nicely snugs that around. Now I typically will go ahead and work a couple more rows in here. Not rows, I'll just work through a couple of the beads. Sorry, I got that a little close. I have my reading glasses on because I'm old and I just can't see very well anymore. And that creates some challenges with the camera. Okay, but look at how great that turned out. It just fits perfectly on there. And now you're ready to go and add your embellishments. Okay, so that's how you do a peyote bezel on a Rivoli. So the second thing I want to show you is how to do a right angle weave bezel. Now you might be thinking at this point, well, why would I ever want to use right angle weave to do a bezel? There's a couple of reasons. When you are using peyote, you'll notice that all of the beads are going in the same direction. Okay, when you are using right angle weave, your beads are going to be pointing in different directions, and just hang with me and you'll see what I mean. So we're going to start off by picking up 4 beads. You're going to start this just like any right angle weave. I'm using because I'm using cream colored beads and I'm using a real light colored Rivoli. We're actually going to bezel this Rivoli. Beautiful champagne color. I love this color. I am using the clear fire line. Again, this is 6-pound test, and I've strung my 4 beads on there. I'm just going to come around. My bead mat's starting to get cluttered here. Okay, so this is where I am so far. Let me adjust my focus here just a little bit with the camera. Okay, and then I'm going to go back through not only the first bead, but the second bead as well. And for those of you, if you're new to right angle weave, essentially it's like you have 4 sides. Okay, you have the top, you have the ceiling, you have the floor, and then you have your left side and your right side. So you want to be coming out of the right side at this point. Okay, and then we're going to add 3 more beads. These are size 11, and you'll notice these are seed beads. These are not delicas or tohos. And if you're using seed beads, to me, I prefer right angle weave for the bezel. Because it's a little bit more forgiving. I keep getting caught on my camera stand over here, my thread does. It's a lot more forgiving than what the peyote is. Okay, so you're going to continue to add 15 units. Okay, each section here you would call a unit. So I have 2 units here. Let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and add a third one. Add 3 beads. I'm going up from the bottom. Okay, and then I'm going to pass through the ceiling. I'm going to get stuck on my video stand, and then I'm going to go down through the side. Okay, and there is my third unit. So go ahead, I'm going to pause for a second and get myself 15 units, and then I will show you how to complete the loop. Okay, so here I have my 15 units, and I am ready to add my 16th unit, which will actually complete the loop. And I found the easiest way to do this and to manage this is to just wrap this right around my finger. I'm going to pick up 1 bead. You can see I am coming out of the bottom of the right side, and I'm going to go up, and this will be to complete the bottom part of my right angle weave. Okay, you can see what's happening here. I'm going to pick up 1 more bead, and I'm going to go right back down through the original bead I came out of to complete my junction. Okay, now once again, at this point, a lot of people are going to come around here and they're going to tie a knot. I'm not going to. You know what, it's your project, you do what you want. Okay, so I am now coming out of the side, the right side of that last unit, and what I want to do is I want to come around and pass through the bottom. Okay, so can you see where I'm coming out? And what that has done now is it's almost created like a peyote row. Now, I did 16 units on this. I have found that that is appropriate for size 11 seed beads for a 14 millimeter Rivoli, and that's just been through trial and error on my own. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add 1 peyote row onto this. So you're just going to go every other one and peyote right around this edge. Okay, so we're just going it's actually not every other one because the bead in between is turned sideways, so you couldn't even go through that bead, or it just wouldn't make sense to go through that bead. So yes, you're skipping a bead, but you're skipping a bead that's turned the opposite way of how you're going. Okay, and you see what's happening there? It is creating like a peyote row. So you want to continue that all the way around the edge. Boy, I'm really having trouble with this thread today. This is why I claim I am definitely not an expert. I am an amateur. I've been beading a long time. I've just found out recently that I'm going to be a grandma, and I've been beading since my kids were babies. But like I said earlier, I don't really have any formal training. A lot of looking at books and a lot of watching videos and just really trial and error. When I first started off, I couldn't afford a whole lot, and a lot of the beads that I bought it at I call them the big box craft stores, and the quality just was pretty terrible, a lot of uneven beads, and so I learned a lot as I've beaded over the years, just by trial and error as far as what works and what doesn't work. So, okay, I'm just about back around. Sorry I've made you watch me bead while I'm blabbing. But I'm just about back to the beginning, and I want you to see how this works in comparison to the straight peyote that I just taught you how to do. Okay, so I'm coming around just about at the end of my row. To me, this works up faster than what peyote does. Okay, so here's the bead that I'm skipping that's turned the wrong way. I'm going to enter into this bead here. And if you're going to mess this up, this is where it's going to happen. Because until you train your eye to see it, it's real easy to think you're supposed to go into this bead. And you're not. You have to go into this bead. And see how that just finished out the rest of that row. So now we have to step up. This is where my thread's coming out. You have to step up into this next bead to put you on track for your rows. We're ready for the 15s, and I'm actually using these beautiful Precosia Charlottes. I love these beads. These are half cut, so they just really twinkle when you work them up. And we're going to add 2 rows of these, and that will create the back of my bezel, just like we did with the other one. And then we're going to work through and do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so instead of making, I think you probably got the idea of what you need to do. So now I want to explain to you why would you choose, one way over the other. Well, part of the reason why you may want to use right angle weave instead is it gives you these openings. You can see in here, let me get my needle so you can really see this. You see how your beads, the direction, it gives you a front opening. Sometimes when you're trying to create different dimensions, having those beads that are angled in that other direction just gives you a lot of options. This is that same color of Rivoli that we were just looking at. And pretty simple, once you get it bezeled, to really add all of your embellishments. This is another one. Whoops. Now this one was actually worked with these beads that made me say bad words because they were so uneven. But by using the right angle weave instead of the straight peyote stitch, I was still able to use these beads to bezel this. And then I just added just one real simple row, and it still turned out so pretty. Again, this is another piece. We've got threads going everywhere. This is another piece that, because I used right angle weave, I was able to work in some different directions on here. And even with these simple, the ones that I didn't embellish, having that right angle weave, you can see, you have the direction of the beads. You still have, like with the peyote, you still have rows that are going in that linear direction. But I don't know, that's why I guess I'm biased. I like having a lot of choices and a lot of options, and using the right angle weave just gives you a lot of different options. But hopefully this video helps you if you're just getting started, or if you've had any trouble. If you have other questions or need some advice, feel free to message me. If you enjoyed the video or if you learned anything, I really appreciate